This is not incompetence. You don't let $1 billion plus go through the state government that you're in charge of, get dispersed out to criminals and shipped back to terrorists overseas without having somebody being complicit in this act.
A scandal of alleged widespread fraud throughout the state of Minnesota has politicians and residents of the state on edge. This comes after prosecutors have charged dozens of people with stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from state-run programs.
The fraud is so bad that the U.S. Attorney's Office has come out and indicated that they believe their entire government programs, where the fraudulent claims outstrip the legitimate ones.
A big reversal in a $7.2 million fraud case in Hannibal County.
Yusuf and his wife, Lowell Ahmed, were charged with stealing $7.2 million of taxpayer money through Medicaid. The couple allegedly spent tens of thousands of the fraud money on luxury items for themselves. Despite the jury swiftly convicting Yusuf, Judge Sarah West last week decided they got it wrong.
Hundreds of social service workers publicly are blaming him for a massive fraud scandal that's been rocking the welfare system in the state. Staff at Minnesota Human Services Department say widespread false billing allegedly funneled more than $1 billion in taxpayer funds to nonprofits that are tied to the Somali community. Now, they claim Walz ignored their warnings, even punished whistleblowers.
His being the governor of Minnesota is the ultimate crime. This guy is a fraud from the word go. He lied about his military career. He got caught on national TV, David, lying about when he was at Tiananmen Square.
So Minnesota is in a full-blown meltdown right now due to what is going on with the Governor Tim Walz. This man could have been the vice president of the United States, but now he is facing one of the biggest fraud scandals in state history, a scandal that is so wild that even the feds are jumping in, whistleblowers are revolting, state workers are blasting him, even on Twitter, and the system looks like it's being held together with duct tape and hope. Let's break down how we got here and why people in Minnesota are completely done with Tim Walz. Let's get into it. So this story has been going on for weeks and months. Finally, the mainstream media has finally picked up on it because you can't ignore $1 billion missing. So here's the short version of all this. Minnesota discovered over $1 billion. $1 billion of taxpayer money was stolen from these state programs. Fake meal programs, fake autism services, fake everything. Some groups claim that they were serving 6,000 meals a day in towns with only 1,200 people. Now, who were they feeding? Ghosts? Snowmen? Imaginary friends?
Fraud in Minnesota under the watch of Governor Walz has exploded in his 7 years as governor. There are 28 known scandals of fraud. Just over 7 years, $1 billion or more of fraud under Governor Walz, finally getting national attention.
These are federal cases. And number two, 71 of the 75 people charged are of East African descent.
I think it's safe to say that there was a real unwillingness or inability among Democratic state officials in Minnesota to recognize some pretty obvious alarm bells here. All across these programs, claims were skyrocketing, absolutely spiraling out of control over a short period of time.
Whistleblowers tried to sound the alarm early. Instead of the cracking down, those whistleblowers said that Walz shut them down, reassigned them, and told them to stay quiet. Now, according to this Twitter post right here, that I don't know if they're still verifying if this is a legit group or not, but it says right here, Tim Walz is 100% responsible. We let him know early on. He retaliated and told us to keep quiet.
The Department of Human Service employees in Minnesota came out with this ex-post, and they're usually tend, I think, from the center to the left. But boy, they put it right where I think it belongs. Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on. He systematically retaliated against whistleblowers and did his best to discredit fraud reports. So not only did he look the other way, but he was retaliating against those people who did spot the fraud and the cause of the fraud.
This is the kind of leader Tim Walz is, ignoring the fire alarm because it's too loud. Tim Walz is either complicit in all this or extremely incompetent. There is no middle ground. When $1 billion fraud ring is growing right underneath your nose, your own workers are begging you to act, the only two explanations can be he knew about it and didn't stop it, which makes him a part of the problem, or he didn't know because he wasn't paying attention, which also makes him unfit to lead. Either way, it's a complete disaster. This is a coordinated criminal operation that took years to build, and somehow the people whose whole job is to protect the taxpayers didn't see it. The people in Minnesota are not stupid. When every alarm is blaring, every whistleblower is talking about this, and every audit is throwing these red flags, but the governor keeps acting like everything is fine. And when the truth finally exploded, it didn't just expose the criminals, it exposed how weak and disconnected Walz's leadership really is.
All across these programs, claims were skyrocketing, absolutely spiraling out of control over a short period of time. And the reality is that the Somali community, which is where these large-scale fraud rings have been concentrated within this population in the state, it is a sizable voting bloc. It is a voting bloc you have to win if you're going to win political office in Minneapolis. And so I think that was likely a incentive here that made some people not want to look too closely at what's been going on.
Now, this fraud situation has been talked about for weeks, especially on YouTube and other parts of social media like Twitter. None of this was new. This was a network. At this point, 83 people were indicted. 79 were of Somali descent, and federal officials say more indictments are coming. And instead of addressing the scale of how massive this nonsense is, Walz just keeps saying it's just a few. Don't blame a whole community.
We're doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy.
No one is blaming an entire community, but people want some transparency. They want some accountability. And investigators revealed something even heavier. Some stolen money may have ended up in Somalia, with a portion of it possibly being funded into an al-Qaeda-linked terror group. I am not making this up. $1 billion fraud scandal suddenly became a national security problem. When Walz was asked on national TV if he takes responsibility for effing all this up and failing to stop the fraud, he said this.
Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can.
What is he talking about? I mean, that's like saying my house didn't get robbed. It just attracts entrepreneurial burglars. This wasn't accountability. This was him playing dodgeball poorly. Hundreds of DHS employees publicly posted that Walz retaliated against whistleblowers, he shut down fraud reports, and protected his image over the truth. Some even said leadership ignored fraud because they didn't want to look discriminatory. This is probably the reason I think they didn't do anything about it. These crimes were ignored out of political correctness. Minnesota leaders didn't want to look like they were attacking Somali immigrants, so instead of stepping in, they stepped back. They didn't want headlines saying that they were profiling anyone. They didn't want activists accusing them of discrimination, so they looked the other way while $1 billion was gone. When you let political correctness override basic responsibility, fraud doesn't just slip through, it thrives. The hesitation created the perfect safe zone for scammers. Leadership froze because they were scared of the outrage, and trying to protect feelings, they ended up protecting the criminals. So that is the real tragic part of all this. By refusing to act early, they made things worse for the innocent Somalian community. Instead of stopping the small group quietly, the scandal exploded into a $1 billion mess that now paints their entire community in a negative light. Trying to avoid backlash created a disaster big enough to trigger a federal investigation. And the residents of Minnesota are tired of leaders who protect optics instead of protecting the people. Minnesota House Speaker Lisa DeMuth added fuel to the fire. She said that fraud under Walz exploded. 28 scandals in 7 years, and Walz has never apologized.
The Republican House Speaker and candidate for governor says the fraud exploded with Walz in office.
He has said that he takes responsibility for putting people in jail, but he's never apologized to the taxpayers. He's never taken accountability of saying this has happened on his watch, and he's pushed it aside until I, as Speaker of the House, established the Fraud Prevention and Agency Oversight Committee.
She also revealed that Democrats blocked a plan to create an independent inspector general, a watchdog that could have stopped a lot of this. Why block independent oversight? Why silence warnings? Why wait until the feds to show up? When you hide the kitchen, usually because something in that kitchen is dancing, maybe some roaches. Even the New York Times, obviously not a conservative media, reported that Walz's administration watched the system spiral out of control. Under Governor Walz, this was a fundamental breakdown in basic management.
There was a post out this morning from the Treasury Secretary about Minnesota dollars being investigated and possibly going to a terrorist organization. Can you respond?
We certainly welcome those investigations. We welcome anybody who wants to help us. We're fixing it. And I said Minnesotans know us and our team. So, again, my message is simple on this. You commit fraud in Minnesota, you're going to prison. I don't care what color you are, what religion you are. Anybody who wants to help us in that, we welcome that. But setting on the sidelines and throwing out accusations, and let's be very clear, demonizing an entire population and lying to people about the safety and security of this state is beneath that.
And when you thought Minnesota couldn't get any more chaotic, here's another situation that is completely outrageous. A Minnesota couple was convicted of a $7.2 million Medicaid fraud. Prosecutors said that they billed Medicaid for services that never happened and lived an extremely lavish lifestyle with the money. A jury found them guilty. But then a judge by the name of Sarah West overturned the entire conviction. She ruled that the evidence was circumstantial and the jurors didn't eliminate other explanations. Other explanations of earning $7.2 million. Did they win the lottery? Did they get a shoe contract? They started rapping? How did they make that much money?
Yusuf and his wife, Lowell Ahmed, were charged with stealing $7.2 million of taxpayer money through Medicaid overbilling in a personal care assistant or PCA scam. Judge Sarah West last week decided they got it wrong.
It's reversing or overturning a jury's verdict.
Jurors in the case can't believe the decision.
I am shocked. I'm shocked based off of all of the evidence that was presented to us and the obvious guilt that we saw based off of the said evidence. It was not a difficult decision whatsoever. The deliberation took probably 4 hours at most. Based off of the state's evidence that was presented, I was beyond a reasonable doubt.
The jurors were shocked. The prosecutors were stunned. This is a system protecting people who just got caught. When convictions get erased on technicalities, people start to lose faith in the justice system altogether. So now the feds are stepping in. Federal investigators, counterterrorism units, and the U.S. Attorney Office are all now officially involved. They say the fraud was so massive that the fake claims outnumbered the real ones. That means criminals weren't just hiding. They weren't sneaking around. They were running through the system untouched because the state wasn't stopping them. So if you stack all this together, $1 billion of taxpayer money has been stolen. Whistleblowers are ignored. You have a judge tossing out convictions here, a possible terror financing, and a governor who just keeps saying, we're doing everything we can. A system that failed where leadership played politics. The people in Minnesota should feel outraged and they should demand him to resign. This situation didn't appear out of nowhere. Tim Walz ignored the warnings. It looks like he punished whistleblowers. He downplayed the fraud. He is dodging accountability and he let this $1 billion disaster explode. Minnesota didn't just lose the money. They lost everything. They lost trust. And now the entire country is watching. So we're going to see what's going on in the next couple of months with this situation. And we'll see if Tim Walz gets any kind of accountability or at least responsibility for this disaster. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. And I'll see you guys in the next video.